I am Michael James. I'm the host for this morning's edition of Live from the Heartland, and I am talking with my friend Thom Clark of the Chicago Media Workshop. And we are discussing a new ordinance that just went through the City Council limiting the funding stream, or putting rigorous hoops to jump over and through for CanTV and probably some other outlets too. Is there any other outlet besides CanTV that is a public access that will be affected by this, or are we just talking Can?
Well, suburban municipalities, and we have some listeners, of course, in Evanston and Skokie and whatnot, have already seen some of the impact of these regulatory changes in the way certain cable companies are now going through the state rather than cities in getting these municipal agreements set up. Without mentioning any particular companies, there's been a shift in the industry going on across the country where they are grabbing more and more control over what had been for the last 20 or 30 years a almost guaranteed funding stream for PEG, public educational governmental stations. And this was just part of the bargain, just like public television was allowed one channel on the broadcast spectrum against ABC and CBS and NBC, so too CanTV in the city of Chicago was allowed access, and thereby allowing the public and citizens access to cable channels through this franchise fee agreement. It's very technical, it's very convoluted. I think that's why City Council was able to sneak this vote through this week.
Who would be the floor leader that would have made this happen?
Traditionally, Alderman Bernie Stone of our adjacent 50th Ward has been quite a strong proponent of cable access. I think in his late career, he decided to go with Alderman Burke of the South Side. He's the one that really carried the bucket on this. There clearly are severe differences between the commissioner in charge of the whole cable arrangement, Norma Reyes, and the operators at CanTV. I don't know to what extent those personalities entered into this, but whatever that is, unfortunately, personalities shouldn't determine whether the public has access to the cable channel opportunities that CanTV provides.
Well, Alderman Eddie Burke has never really been an advocate for the people's interests.
No.
And he is someone who would certainly be positioning himself to fill Daley's shoes at some time. Maybe he, in advance of, along with Daley, wants to control the access to information?
I think that's exactly what's going on. And with the Olympic bid around the corner, the mayor's office has been really clamping down. Most opposition has been bought off. Every time that there's even a slight inkling of questions being raised. I mean, we all love the Olympics. The question is, how do we pay for it? And I think it's legitimate to ask those kind of questions in a city, in a state like Chicago and Illinois, given that $100 million Millennium Parks end up costing $1 billion. Millennium Park is a wonderful park, but we're paying 10 times what was promised for that because of the lack of disclosure and the way the mayor controlled information over how it was financed. I think that's what many of us fear about the Olympics. It's not that we're opposed to the Olympics. It's who's going to pay and who's going to benefit.
Just in case the listeners didn't follow a few shows recently, we have had two people on Live from the Heartland discussing the Olympics. We've had a couple of people from a local group who are opposing the Olympics because of what it's going to cost people, along with Chris Shaw out of Canada, who did a book on the Olympics and Vancouver. I went up to him actually and said, well, you know, as a member of Athletes United for Peace, we kind of like the Olympics, and we think it would be a way to generate some funding that would not only have better public facilities, but the kids in the high schools would not have to be running in the hallways. And he basically said, look, everybody wants that when the Olympics come to their town. The question is, you never get it. And then we had Gordon Thompson, who is a former track coach at Loyola, DePaul, and now at Clemson, who is also a member of Athletes United for Peace and involved in a lot of Olympic activity and training. He goes around the world with teams. He was the first person I said who said to me that the only way Chicago will get the Olympics is if Obama is the president. And today he believes we will get the Olympics. I believe we'll get the Olympics. So the challenge that's going to come up is to keep from getting screwed by the process.
And let me just, since we've kind of morphed from CanTV off to the Olympics,
go back and forth.
One of my cable shows earlier this year was Conrad Worrell, of all people, talking about the lack of any training facility for track and field in the Chicago public schools.
Right, there's
and
none.
How can we be invited to the Olympics here when high school kids can't even work out and aspire to being part of the Olympics? And that's a program we did on CanTV cable access. It's not a program you would have found on the Mayor's Municipal Channel. It's not a story that any of the commercial stations picked up on. They hardly have any news staff left to cover such stories. That's the kind of story that would disappear from the airwaves if the mayor's proposal that went through the city council this week goes ahead.
It's interesting you brought up Conrad Worrell. He would be a good guy to have on this show. And if he's listening, I'd like to invite him. He actually turns out to be the uncle of my daughter's roommate at a school back in Connecticut.
How about that?
How about that? Okay, so do you think, let me ask you, Thom Clark, have there been any aldermen are there any statements out there about this vote yet? Has anyone challenged our friend Helen Schiller, who went along with the vote? Can you tell us who else voted opposed the mayor's move to control?
Well, I'll tell you that there has not been any coverage of this vote. It was kind of buried in a regular city council roll call. 11 aldermen voted against, and it does include Joe Moore. And I'm going to mention the names of people who voted against because I think their constituents ought to
cheer them on.
To cheer them on and congratulate them. The second ward's Robert Fioretti, Pat Dahl, Tony Preckwinkle, Leslie Hairston, Sandy Jackson, Anthony Beal, Willie Cochran, Howard Brookins, former board member, Ricardo Munoz, Sharon Denise Dixon, and Joe Moore, and Brendan Riley was absent. But those other aldermen voted against this proposal, and they ought to be applauded for that, and we ought to support them for sticking up for public interests.
There's a few good alder people that didn't go along with it, so everyone should start putting the pressure. What do you think this will mean for CanTV, Thom? Do you think they'll come through it? Do you think they'll figure out other ways to raise money? Is their existence threatened, other than the question of being able to finance their operation?
In the short term, they are probably looking at budget cuts in the next year because in this current economic environment, trying to raise new money from donors, from foundations is very, very difficult. Foundations are understandably paying attention to organizations that they've already been supporting rather than starting anything new. So at the very least, we're probably looking at a cutback in programming. I don't think CanTV is going to go away right away, but this is not a good sign of either the short-term or long-term future of public access television.
Well, what makes it rough is that, here we are in a time when people are really optimistic about a new president and an alleviation or a direct out and about change of some of the negative policies that have characterized our country for so long, that we have this kind of diminishing of democracy at a time when we expected democracy to flourish.
Well, I think that one of the real challenges we face as citizens, and again, the internet may be our salvation on this, but the changing media landscape is limiting our choices on how so-called mainstream media or conventional sources of information are operating and getting stuff to us. And the internet's not taking its place yet. Broadcast airways have already been limited. This is one more limit.
Thom Clark, you have a show on CanTV. You want to tell us when people could check out what you look like and listen to what you have to say?
Every Saturday night at 8 o'clock on Channel 21. Tonight we'll be talking with Tim Black and Jamiko Rose about organizing, both young and old, African-American organizers. Tomorrow morning, my monthly radio show on WNUA will take a look at the changing face of poverty of Illinois given increased unemployment.
I want to thank you, Thom Clark, for coming on the show. I want to thank Luke Hansen and Cassie Younger from Caro, Chicago for coming on the show. I want to thank Francis Scudellari and Jim Ginderske from the Urban Coaster for being on the show. We'll be back next week with some more Live from the Heartland. I want to thank my co-hosts Lisa Smith, Katie Hogan, and today Chris Colgan. I want to thank our on-site engineer and videographer Evan West. I want to thank Susan Dunn over at the station for the great work that she does. And I want to encourage you all to Keep listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7. And as we tell you every week, we encourage you to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that you do. This is Michael James for all of us at the Heartland, Live from the Heartland, saying over and out, and all power to the people. Don't forget that.